You're listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets. Welcome back to another episode of The Builder's Mindset. If you're watching on video, I want you to see my hat and I want you to read it. And if you're not, I'm going to read it for you. It says, pick the vibes up. Why did I want you to hear that as I started this episode? Because 2 episodes ago, I talked about that we're in times that I've never seen in the 20 plus years that I've been in this industry. We're in times where what I see is that prices are flat to falling for home prices, not dramatically, but flat to falling, and costs are rising. And are we seeing that bear out in certain aspects and certain metrics? Yes, we are. I just finished today the earnings report summary for Q1 of 2025. And I will say, are builder margins getting pinched? Yes, they are. Not horribly to the point where I think we need to have like this gloom and doom. And you know, that's not my story. That's why I said, let's pick the vibes up. So I'm going to bring up something else that's interesting. And here's the focus on the spring selling season. I talked about this already. And so as I was going through and reading all of the summaries that we build from the transcripts, from all the earnings calls of all the publics, there's a theme that just kept popping up, and this is something unique. I've historically said, as we roll into the new year, we always wonder in this industry, is this going to be the year that we have kind of the downturn? This industry historically has been like a 10-year cycle, and it's usually like 7.3 to 8.2. And so, you know, it's historically, if you talk to anybody, they'll tell you if they go back well before me, you've got 7 to 8 good years, and then you usually have 2 to 3 kind of off or bad years. And they're by different reasons. Sometimes it's just like the cycle. Sometimes it's like, the SNL problem. We had the great financial recession, which kind of like really, that was sort of on the longer stretch of that 3-year window of things in terms of the downturn. And then I've talked about this before. COVID really kind of got things out of whack because it created this interesting demand for housing that we had sort of a quarter to a quarter and a half, 2 quarters, right when we got into COVID, where things were not great, kind of in that sort of spring selling season, kind of that April, May, June time. But then kind of by the time July got out, things sort of boomed. And then, you know, we call it the spring selling season because kind of like it ramps up into summer. Summer's pretty solid, but then typically by the time summer's over, it starts to wane because a lot of families move around the school year. But COVID really whacked that up because basically we had work from home, we had school from home, we had all this stuff. So everything, like this is a completely different environment. And so what's unique now, as I said, like a couple episodes ago, I've not been in a market where I've seen prices for homes flat to falling and costs rising, and we're in that now. And I talked to lots of trade partners, and they're all saying that they're getting pressure for cost increases from their suppliers. And as we talked about, the only pinch then can be for labor, and I hate that. I hate that because I truly believe when we push wages down, especially for trades, it hurts the greater economy. But we talked about that in the other episode a few weeks back. Now what we're going to talk about is this another nuance that I just really realized. I've historically said when January comes around, you know, don't get excited whether or not, or down whether or not January is a great year, a great month, or an okay month. We all talk about like the spring selling season really kind of kicks off with the Super Bowl, which is usually the first or second, I think it's the first or second weekend in February. And then I've gone so far in the past as to say, if February's not great, like wait till March. And I've been on record as saying, if March isn't great, then we're probably not in for a good year. Now, here's where the kind of the caveat comes in. Almost all of the builders reporting talked about January and February being less than they'd like. softer than they wanted it to be, softer than usual. And so there's all this gloom and doom about inventory levels rising and the spring selling season being disappointing. But I'm going to tell you, if you go back, and this is what challenge, remember, I always, even when it's the headlines, I say, get into the details. And there are creative ways that you can go and look at all the summaries of what these builders are saying based on their earnings reports. You can either listen to them, or you can usually get access to most of the transcripts. Some builders make their transcripts a bit more available more easily than others, but you can get to them if you really want to. Dig into the weeds, and what you're going to find is the March sales numbers improving. And I can't wait. I don't believe we don't have April's yet, but they should be coming out soon because we're still in May. But I saw a point of all the builders, and you can make the argument that they're trying to sell out to protect their stocks or whatnot, but there was a general sentiment of true cautious optimism because they all were acknowledging that January and February sales numbers were not what they had expected, not what they had hoped for, but March was noticeably improving. Now, are they still incentivizing? Yes, they are. Are we potentially in a flat kind of year? I've said it. I've gone on record as saying that I believe total closings for the year of 2025 are going to be plus or minus 2.5% of 2024. You look at certain builders and they're predicting better increases than that, which is interesting because here's what you want to. The CEO's job of any public company is to return value to shareholders. And the biggest way that they do that is keeping the stock price stable or rising, buying back stock to keep the supply strong from how much is out there on the market. And so when earnings reports when the calls happen, and these CEOs and executives and C-level executives of these public home builders or any public company make comments, and they always say, like, there's a disclaimer at the beginning, these are forward-looking statements that may change materially based on shifts and moves in the market. But when they give guidance that their closing numbers are going to be bigger than last year, I think Meritage broke 15,000 homes in 2024, and if I remember correctly, I'd have to go look, but I think they're forecasting 16,000 plus this year. I believe Taylor Morrison is forecasting. Taylor Morrison has big growth plans through now to 2030. And so there's a couple that are flat, that are, I think KB and I believe Horton they're forecasting flat to down. And this is why I said it's going to be, some will be up, some will be down. I think it's going to be in that plus or minus 2.5% range. And it really just depends upon your community count overall and your community count specifically in terms of where your communities are, your price point. There's a lot of nuances that go into like what zip codes are you in, more A locations, more B locations, more C locations. But back to the point of like all this gloom and doom and the account on the housing market is, and look, politically too, I sense a lot of like negativity from the mainstream media, and I think a fair amount of that is driven by the political machinations that are trying to move things in a direction that they want. And maybe one of these days I'll touch the third rail and like go into and tip my hat in politics, like in a big way as to what I think's happening. But when you look at the inherent demand that we know is there, and builders they essentially are starting to get a little bit of a price pressure, incentive stickiness, and they're starting to see their margins pinched a little bit. And you could see that when the earnings report comes out in a week or two, actually we'll try to have it out by the end of this coming week, you will see, and actually hopefully by the time this airs, that earnings report will be out and available. And then the next episode will be specifically on that. Not every home builder is having the significant margin drops that you would think. They might not have had the growth that they had hoped, but a lot of them are still gross margining over 20%. A lot of them are still netting over 10%. So they're solid, they're healthy, their balance sheets are healthy. You know, this is an opportunity for builders. And if you go back to last week's episode when I talked about what I felt that the new home company acquisition of Landsea, taking them public, what that says about how the industry and the executives in the home building industry are bullish on housing and on home building. This consistent theme that I'm seeing in the earnings calls, that March was a lot better than January and February. I'm not hearing them say like March was the best ever, and I'm not trying to say that, but they all seem to point out that like their potential pessimism based on the January and February softness of sales is starting to wane based on the revival that they're seeing coming back in March. Okay, so think about that. And what I come back to for everybody is, look, control what you can control. How can you perform the best that you can to get your SG&A, your sales, general, administrative expenses down? How can you produce more homes per employee, more revenue per employee? How can you control costs that you can control? And I highly suggest that you do it in a way that doesn't just beat your trades up to squeeze their margin. Okay? Work with them. You know what I'm going to say right now. Product development, I'm going to beat that dead horse. And like, this is an opportunity, because there should be better land deals. There should be opportunities for you to, negotiate supply deals with suppliers. I think that's a fair and safe, way to get better pricing. If you can get some consistency in your offering, leverage your scale, and then look at your product. And I know that if you're looking at product, this is stuff that we're now talking about, like second quarter, easily second quarter, third quarter, probably closings for 2026. But why not start focusing on your product to product development, that process, and those plans to improve your margins? Okay. So if you're not, you're just like, they say a rising tide lifts all boats. Well, so does a receding tide. Okay. And so, how far up do you want to come? Like, right? If you want to get like further on land, you better go with the tide as fast as you can. When the tide starts to go out, you don't want to get beached. Start going when it goes. You want to flow and follow the tide, but you also want to control what you can control. That's the speed and direction of the boat that you're in. So I see we're going to feel a lot better about housing, I believe, when we see the April sales numbers. And I think that we'll start parsing that out when the numbers come out. But I think we're going to start to see that optimism stay in terms of builders feeling comfortable that 2025 is a plateau flat year, ultimately, up or down. So focus on that. Let's look deeper into what's going on. But really, I can't say enough about whether or not the demand for housing materializes into sales for you or sales for your company. There's a fair amount of that that's out of your control. There's a fair amount of it that's in your control. Is your sales team equipped with the right training and the right tactics to garner the sales that maybe your competitors are also trying to get? Is your purchasing department given the right time and processes to properly bid, and your trades properly bid and then properly negotiate the best prices? Are you leveraging your scale to put simplicity in your business where you can in terms of product offering, number of SKUs, and like leveraging, even if you're only building 250 homes a year, are you taking advantage and maximizing it? Do your superintendents have the right programs, and are they trained appropriately to use those programs to schedule your jobs efficiently so that your cycle times are as low as they can be, and your trades are informed and communicated well enough so that they can make money showing up on your jobs? You want your trades to be able to give you the best price. Make sure you have the best plans and the best scheduling. And so there are the plans. Are your plans, like when you look at your plan set, do you look at those plans and go, these are nice plans that really look like they build well, they build efficient, and trades are going to want to build. And the trades men and women who come to the job are going to say, I want to go to builder ABC and build those houses because they're efficient, they're not a pain in my butt, and I can make some money building those houses. Are you doing that? Are you doing any of these things? Are you doing all of these things? And I hope you are. And let's make 2025 the best that it possibly can be, and it can be a good year for you. But probably not going to go on record, go down as on record as the best year you've ever had, but it can still be a very good year for you if you commit to evaluating your business and executing as properly as you can. And oh, by the way, if you do that, guess what will happen? 2026 will be one of your best years. So, are you just going to let 2026, take you with the tide, up or down? Or are you going to take control, take actions, and control what you can control to set yourself up now for 2026 to be the best year of your company? That's what I recommend, and start setting your team up for success. That's all I got. Let's see what April has to show for us. And like I said, I think 2025 is going to be a good year, and I think 2026 is going to be amazing. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please connect with us if you got any comments, or you got any questions, you want us to talk about something, anything deeper. We'd love to hear from you. We appreciate you listening. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you next week. You're listening to The Builder's Mindset with Mike DiGiovanni, presented by Amazing Mindsets.